The conference hall stretched like a canyon made of metal and glass. Thousands of alien delegates filled the seats, their strange bodies creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. At the center podium stood Ambassador Nari Kim, her black hair tied back, her uniform crisp and clean. She held a datapad in her steady hands. "Earth requests full membership in the Galactic Council," Nari said. Her voice echoed through the translation devices every delegate wore. "We have followed all protocols. We have opened our borders for inspection. We have shared our technology and culture. We ask only for equal standing among the stars." In the upper gallery, Commander Thelkos watched with 4 of his yellow eyes. His body looked like a massive insect, wrapped in military armor. He commanded the Velkrim Empire's 3rd Fleet, and he found the human amusing. So small, so soft, so absurdly confident. "They think they belong here," Thelkos clicked to his aide. "After only 200 years in space, we have species here who traveled the stars before their planet learned to walk upright." The council voted. Most species abstained. A few voted yes. The Velkrim bloc voted no, and their influence was enough. The application was denied. Nari's face showed nothing. She bowed slightly and returned to her seat. But Captain Do-hyun Park, watching from Earth through a live feed, saw her jaw tighten. He knew that look. Nari was angry. Do-hyun sat in his command chair aboard the destroyer Times, Indomitable Asterisk, orbiting the colony world of New Busan. The planet below housed 3 million humans, mostly Korean families who had left Earth seeking new opportunities. They grew food, built cities, raised children. They were peaceful. "Captain, we have incoming vessels," his sensor officer reported. 15 ships. Velkrim signatures. Do-hyun stood up. "Hail them. Ask their intentions." The communication came back quickly. Too quickly. The Velkrim had already decided what they would do. Human colony. "You are occupying space, claimed by the Velkrim Empire. You have 1 hour to evacuate the planet." Do-hyun felt ice in his stomach. "This planet was surveyed and empty when we arrived. We filed all proper claims with the Galactic Council 20 years ago. Do-hyun, 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 your claims are rejected. You have 1 hour. 1 hour to evacuate 3 million people." It was impossible. Everyone in the bridge knew it. The Velkrim knew it too. Do-hyun opened channels to the colony below. "Governor, begin emergency evacuation procedures. Get everyone to the shelters. Now." On the planet, alarms began to scream. Dr. Ji-won Lee was teaching a class on alien biology when the warning came. Her students, young faces full of confusion and fear, looked to her for answers. "Underground," Ji-won said firmly. "Everyone move calmly. We've drilled for this." But they had drilled for natural disasters, for equipment failures. Not for this. The hour passed like sand through fingers. Do-hyun's small fleet of 5 ships positioned themselves between the Velkrim and the planet. It was a futile gesture. 15 military vessels against 5 lightly armed patrol ships. But Do-hyun would not move. "Final warning, human captain. Move aside or be destroyed." "Negative," Do-hyun replied. "I am defending a civilian population. Your actions violate 12 different Galactic Council laws regarding..." The transmission cut off. The Velkrim opened fire. Do-hyun's fleet fought. They used every trick, every tactic, every desperate maneuver they could think of. They destroyed 2 Velkrim ships and damaged 4 more. But it was not enough. 3 of Do-hyun's ships died in flames. His own vessel took heavy damage. And then the Velkrim bombarded New Busan. The strikes were precise. Not designed to destroy the planet, just to send a message. They hit the 3 largest cities. 30,000 people died in seconds. Most were in shelters, but the Velkrim used weapons that burned through rock and metal. When the Velkrim fleet withdrew, they left behind burning cities and a crippled defense force. Do-hyun sat in his damaged command chair, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. and watched the casualty reports climb. On Earth, Admiral Tae-jin Choi stood in the war room deep beneath Seoul. The walls were covered with screens, showing every human colony, every ship, every asset. He was old for a military commander, his hair gray, his face lined with years of service. He had fought in the last Earth War, the one that finally united the planet. He knew what war cost. "Get me Ambassador Kim," he said quietly. Light years away, Nari Kim was already demanding an emergency council session. The other species came reluctantly. They did not want to be involved. The Velcrim were powerful. Humans were new. Nari stood before them all, and this time, her voice shook with barely controlled rage. 30,000 civilians are dead. Children, teachers, farmers. They violated every law of war, every principle of civilized conduct. We demand the immediate surrender of Commander Thelkos for trial. We demand reparations. We demand— You demand? Thelkos interrupted, present in the chamber now. His voice clicked with amusement. You are a species of one small world and 47 tiny colonies. We are an empire of 10,000 worlds. You will accept our dominance, or you will be removed from space entirely. Choose quickly. In word, evenly HP, the council chamber fell silent. Every species waited to see what the humans would do. Most expected surrender. That was how these things worked. The strong dominated. The weak submitted. That was the way of the galaxy. Nari looked at Thelkos. Then she looked at every delegate in the chamber. You have 48 hours, she said. Withdraw your forces. Surrender Commander Thelkos for trial, or Earth will consider this an act of total war. The chamber erupted in noise. Laughter from the Velcrim. Nervous chattering from the others. War? Against the Velcrim Empire? But Admiral Tae-jin Choi, watching from Earth, was already giving orders. Orders that had been prepared for years, waiting for exactly this moment. Because humans, alone among all the species in the galaxy, had never stopped expecting war. They had hoped for peace, but they had prepared for war. The 48-hour countdown began. The 48 hours ended. The Velcrim did nothing. They posted guards around their stations and laughed about the human ultimatum. Commander Thelkos gave an interview to a galactic news network where he mocked Earth's military capabilities. They have, 300 ships? He said, his mandibles clicking with amusement. We have 7 million. Do they even understand numbers? 6 hours later, 3 Velcrim military stations went completely dark. No explosions. No debris fields. Just silence, where there had been thousands of soldiers and support staff. On the bridge of the stealth destroyer Times, Silent Shadow *, Captain Hee-jin Song watched her crew work. The ship was completely black, covered in materials that absorbed sensor beams instead of reflecting them. Its engines ran cold. Its weapons fired without light or sound. 3 targets eliminated, her weapons officer reported. No survivors detected. Any response from nearby Velcrim forces? Hee-jin asked. No, Captain. They don't even know we're here. Hee-jin nodded. Humanity had been building these ships for 30 years, hidden in the dark spaces between stars where no one looked. Every nation on Earth had contributed. Every engineer had worked in secret, because humans remembered their history, and their history taught them one lesson very clearly. Hope for peace, but prepare for war. Next target, Hee-jin said. The supply depot at Velcrim Station 7. The Times, Silent Shadow Times, slipped through space like a ghost. Behind it, 30 more ships, just like it, moved toward their own targets. On the Velcrim homeworld, Emperor Kelvar received the news in his throne room. 3 stations destroyed, 6 more damaged, supply lines severed. And worst of all, no one knew how it happened. Find them, he ordered his military council. Find these human ships and destroy them, but you cannot find what you cannot see. The stealth ships struck and vanished. They appeared behind defensive lines, destroyed critical infrastructure, and disappeared before anyone could respond. Colonel Minho Kang led the Ghost Corps, humanity's special forces. His team of 200 soldiers specialized in operations no one was supposed to survive. They wore armor that bent light around them. They moved in silence. They struck without warning. Target is the communication relay on the third moon, Minho told his team as their insertion craft approached. Destroy it, and the Velcrim lose coordination across 15 sectors. Defenses? One of his soldiers asked. Heavy. 5,000 guards. Automated defense systems. Energy shields. So a normal Tuesday. The team laughed quietly. Gallows humor was a human trait. When things were darkest, they made jokes. It helped them stay sane. The insertion craft dropped them from high orbit, their armor absorbing the heat of re-entry. They landed in darkness and moved like shadows. The Velcrim guards never saw them coming. The facility's shields meant nothing when the humans were already inside. Minho planted the charges himself, ensuring maximum damage. When the relay exploded, 15 sectors of Velcrim military lost communication simultaneously. Ships couldn't coordinate. Commanders couldn't give orders. Chaos spread like wildfire. Meanwhile, Admiral Taejin Choi directed the war from Earth. His command center tracked every human ship, every operation, every enemy movement. But unlike the Velcrim with their rigid command structure, Taejin gave his officers freedom to make their own decisions. Captain Park, he said over a secure channel, what's the status of your fleet? Do-hyun Park, still limping in damaged ships, responded immediately. We've been repaired and reinforced. Ready for orders. I want you to take 20 ships and hit the Velcrim supply line between sectors 8 and 9. Disrupt their logistics. Make them hungry. Understood, Admiral. What about civilian vessels in the area? Standard rules apply. Warn them once. If they don't leave, disable them. But no casualties if possible. We're not like them. That was important. Humans fought hard, but they followed rules. Even in total war, there were lines they would not cross. Civilian populations were protected. Prisoners were treated well. Wounded enemies received medical care, not because it was easy, but because humans remembered what happened when they abandoned those rules. Lieutenant Woo Jin Nam led a boarding team that specialized in capturing enemy ships. His team of 50 Marines practiced 100 scenarios until they could execute them blindfolded. Target is a Velcrim heavy cruiser, Woo Jin briefed his team. Intelligence says it's carrying new weapon prototypes. We need those intact. The boarding operation was textbook perfect. They cut through the hull, overwhelmed the defenders with flash grenades and precise fire, and secured the ship in 17 minutes. The Velcrim crew surrendered when they realized the humans weren't killing prisoners. Woo Jin stood on the enemy bridge and looked at the captured commander. You're now a prisoner of war. You'll be treated according to the galactic laws of war, which your empire seems to have forgotten. You'll get food, medical care, and humane conditions. The Velcrim commander stared at him with multiple eyes. Why? We killed your civilians. Because, Woo Jin said simply, we're better than that. Woo Jin. We're better than that. Back on Earth, Dr. Ji-won Lee had survived the attack on New Busan. She now worked with the military, analyzing Velcrim biology to find weaknesses, not to create bioweapons. Humans had banned those centuries ago, but to understand how to fight them more effectively. Their exoskeletons are strong, she reported to Admiral Taejin, but they have a weak point at the joint between the upper and lower thorax. Also, they're extremely sensitive to certain sound frequencies. We could develop non-lethal sonic weapons. Non-lethal options are good, Taejin said. We want to defeat them, not exterminate them. Ji-won understood. Humans had nearly exterminated themselves several times in their history. They knew how genocide ended. It never ended well for anyone. As weeks passed, the galaxy watched in shock. The mighty Velcrim Empire, conquerors of thousands of worlds, was being systematically dismantled by a species that had only left their homeworld 200 years ago. Other species on the Galactic Council began sending quiet diplomatic messages to Earth. Not offers of help. They were too afraid of the Velcrim for that. But expressions of interest. Requests for information. Hints that maybe humanity's application for membership should be reconsidered. Ambassador Nari Kim read these messages with cold satisfaction. "They're watching," she told Admiral Tajian on their secure channel. "The whole galaxy is watching. They're seeing what happens when you massacre human civilians." "Good," Tajian replied. "Let them see. Let them understand. We're not conquerors. We're not monsters. But we will not be victims." In space, Captain Heijin Song's Times, Silent Shadow, Times approached the Velcrim homeworld's orbital defense network. It was massive. Thousands of weapon platforms and defensive satellites arranged in careful patterns, impregnable by conventional standards. But humans didn't think conventionally. "Deploy the nanobots," Heijin ordered. Tiny machines, each smaller than a grain of sand, sprayed from the Times' Silent Shadow asterisk. They drifted through space on carefully calculated trajectories. When they touched the orbital platforms, they began to eat. Not explosively. Quietly. Efficiently. They consumed critical circuits and fuel lines. 3 days later, the entire defense network collapsed. Not from a battle. Not from overwhelming force. From a million invisible saboteurs eating away at its foundation. Emperor Kilvar, looking up at his undefended skies, finally understood. The humans weren't just warriors. They were problem solvers who treated war like any other problem. They analyzed. They adapted. They found solutions. And the Velcrim had just become a problem, with no solution in sight. The Velcrim Empire mobilized. Emperor Kelvar called up every reserve, activated every mothballed ship, and converted civilian factories to military production. 10,000 worlds contributed to the war machine. Millions of ships began moving toward human space. On Earth, Admiral Taijin Choi watched the massive fleet assemble. His officers waited nervously for his reaction. When it came, it surprised them. "Good," he said simply. "They're gathering in one place. That makes them easier to hit." Commander Seonghwa Ryu worked in the Cyber Warfare Division, deep in an underground facility in Tokyo. His team of 300 specialists did not fire weapons or fly ships. They attacked data streams and computer networks. In modern war, information was as valuable as ammunition. "I'm inside their logistics network," Seonghwa reported. "They're routing supply shipments through hub stations. If we feed them false data, we can redirect their supplies to empty sectors." "Do it," his supervisor approved. "Starve their fleet." The code virus spread through Velcrim networks like a disease. Ships went to refueling stations that had no fuel. Food shipments arrived at empty warehouses. Ammunition convoys got lost in deep space. The massive Velcrim fleet began to fracture from internal confusion, but the Velcrim still came. A force of 10 million ships approached the human colony of New Seoul, determined to wipe it out as they had attacked New Busan. This time, they would destroy the entire planet. Captain Do-hyun Park stood on the bridge of his flagship, the newly completed battleship Times Defiance asterisk. Around him, 500 human warships prepared for battle. They were outnumbered 20,000 to 1. "All ships," Do-hyun broadcast on the fleet channel. "Remember why we fight. Remember New Busan. Remember the 30,000 civilians who died because they thought we were weak. Today, we show them the truth." The fleets met in the space between New Seoul and its moon. The Velcrim attacked in massive waves, confident their numbers would overwhelm the humans. They were wrong. Human ships fought in coordinated groups, covering each other's weaknesses. They used the moon for cover, ambushing Velcrim ships as they rounded the horizon. They launched waves of small drones that swarmed larger vessels, confusing sensors and overwhelming point defenses, and they fought smart. Every human captain had studied military history. They knew tactics from ancient naval battles, from aerial dogfights, from tank warfare. They adapted old lessons to new situations. Sergeant Unji Bey served as a combat medic on one of the ships engaged in the battle. When the Times Horizon Times took heavy damage, she worked in emergency conditions, treating wounded crew members while the ship shook from weapons fire. "I need to get to engineering," a wounded lieutenant told her. "My team needs me." "You have a punctured lung," Unji said firmly. "You need to stay here. People are dying down there." Unji looked at him, then made a decision. She grabbed her medical kit and her weapon. "Then, we go together. I'll keep you breathing." They ran through damaged corridors, Unji carrying her patient's weight. When they reached engineering, she treated 6 more casualties while weapons fire hammered the ship's hull. She saved 5 of them. The 6th died, holding her hand, thanking her for trying. Later, someone would recommend her for a medal. She would refuse it, saying she was just doing her job. The battle for New Seoul lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Velcrim had lost 9 million ships. The humans had lost 230. The mathematics of war had shifted. The Velcrim were strong, but strength meant nothing if you did not know how to use it. Private Minji O was 19 years old and scared. She stood at her battle station, operating a defensive gun on the cruiser Times stalwart Asterisk, and watched older soldiers work around her. They moved with confidence born from training. She tried to copy their calm. When a Velcrim boarding party breached the hull, Minji found herself in close combat. Her training took over. She fired her weapon in controlled bursts, just like on the practice range. She covered her squad mates, just like in the drills. And when a Velcrim warrior charged at her with a blade weapon, she stood her ground and dropped him with 3 shots. After the fight, she threw up in a bathroom. Then she cleaned her weapon, checked her ammunition, and returned to her post. Because that was what soldiers did. A human journalist embedded with the fleet broadcast her story. Private Minji O, barely more than a child, standing firm against the empire that thought humans were weak. The image spread across human colonies, becoming a symbol of determination. Minji hated the attention, but she understood its importance. People needed heroes. She would be one, even if she did not feel like one. The Velcrim responded to their military defeats by targeting human civilian infrastructure. If they could not win battles, they would terrorize the population into surrender. They were about to learn another lesson about humans. When Velcrim raiders attacked the farming colony of New Jeju, they found the civilians armed and waiting. Every human colony had defense forces. Every civilian had basic military training. Earth had learned from its own history that warriors came from civilian populations. The division between soldier and citizen was smaller than in other species. The raiders expected easy victims. They found farmers with rifles, teachers with explosives, and children evacuating to prepared bunkers while their parents fought. The Velcrim killed hundreds of civilians before being driven off. But they lost thousands of their own soldiers and gained nothing. Across human space, every colony became a fortress. Every civilian became a potential soldier. The Velcrim could not terrorize a population that refused to be terrorized. In a captured Velcrim facility, Captain Do-hyun Park oversaw the processing of enemy prisoners. There were thousands of them now, taken from destroyed ships and occupied stations. They expected torture or execution. Instead, they received medical treatment, food, and shelter. "Why do you do this?" a Velcrim officer asked Do-hyun. "We killed your people. We destroyed your homes." Do-hyun looked at him with tired eyes. "Because we have rules, laws of war. We follow them even when the enemy does not, especially when the enemy does not. That is what makes us different." The Velcrim officer did not understand. His species believed in strength and dominance. The idea of showing mercy to a defeated enemy seemed weak to him. But Do-hyun was broadcasting this conversation to the entire galaxy. Every species on the Galactic Council watched humans treating prisoners with dignity and care. They saw the contrast between human discipline and Velcrim brutality. And slowly, carefully, some of them began to change their opinions. Ambassador Nari Kim addressed an emergency council session, broadcast across the galaxy. Behind her stood images of destroyed Velcrim military assets, of treated prisoners, of protected civilians. "The Velcrim Empire attacked us without cause," she said. "They killed 30,000 civilians to send a message. We responded with military force, destroying their capacity to wage war. But we have not harmed their civilians. We have not bombed their cities. We have not committed atrocities." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We fight to defend ourselves. We fight to establish that slaughtering civilians has consequences. We fight so that no other species will suffer what we suffered. But we do not fight to destroy or dominate. When the Velcrim surrender, when they agree to follow the laws of civilized warfare, this can end." Commander Thelkos, watching from a secure location, felt something he had never experienced before: fear. The humans were not just winning militarily. They were winning politically. They were winning morally. They were showing the galaxy a better way to wage war, and that was more dangerous to the Velcrim Empire than any weapon. On Earth, Admiral Taejin Choi received daily reports of victories, but he took no joy from them. Each victory cost lives. Each battle left families mourning. He had fought in enough wars to know that winning and surviving were different things. "Sir," an aide said quietly, "the Velcrim are requesting a ceasefire. They want to negotiate." Taejin looked at the map showing Velcrim territory. Half their empire was in chaos. Their supply lines were destroyed. Their fleets were scattered. They were defeated, even if they would not admit it yet. "Tell them we will negotiate," Taejin said. "But only if Commander Thelkos surrenders for trial. And only if they accept a complete reform of galactic military law. No more surprise attacks. No more civilian massacres. Wars must follow rules. Or, they are not wars. They are murder." The message went out. The galaxy held its breath and waited. 6 months had passed since the war began. The Velcrim Empire, which had stood for 3,000 years, was crumbling. Not from external conquest, but from internal collapse. Their economy could not sustain total war. Their citizens questioned why they fought. Their military command, fractured under constant defeat. Emperor Kelvar sat in his throne room, alone except for his guards. Messages arrived hourly from his territories. Food riots on the industrial worlds. Military mutinies in the outer sectors. Allied species abandoning the empire to seek separate peace with humanity. "Your Majesty," his chief advisor entered quietly. 17 more council species have signed non-aggression pacts with Earth. They are offering the humans trade agreements and mutual defense treaties. "They are cowards," Kelvar hissed. "They abandon us in our time of need." "They are practical," the advisor said carefully. "The humans have shown they can defend their interests. And they have shown they do not seek conquest. Other species see an opportunity for partnership instead of domination." Kelvar wanted to rage, to order more attacks, to show strength. But he was an emperor without power. His fleets were destroyed or scattered. His economy was collapsing. His people were starving while military factories continued to produce weapons no one could afford to fuel. Meanwhile, on a dozen worlds, General Young-Soo Han led occupation forces with an unusual approach. When human forces captured Velcrim territory, they did not destroy or loot. They restored order, provided food and medical care, and protected civilians from chaos. "General," one of his officers reported, "the local population is requesting permission to form a civilian government. They want to negotiate their own surrender terms directly with Earth." Young-Soo considered this. Standard military doctrine said occupied territory should be controlled strictly, but humans had learned from their own history that occupation bred resistance. Give people autonomy, and they were more likely to cooperate. Grant permission, Young-Soo said. Tell them we will withdraw our forces once they establish stable governance. We are not conquerors. We are liberators from a government that sent them to war without cause. This pattern repeated across occupied Velcrim space. Human forces brought order without oppression. They punished war criminals but protected civilians. They rebuilt infrastructure and reopened trade routes. And slowly, former Velcrim citizens began to see humans not as enemies, but as rescuers. A propaganda video spread through Velcrim networks. It showed General Young-Soo personally carrying a wounded Velcrim child to a human field hospital. It showed human soldiers sharing their rations with starving civilians. It showed human engineers repairing power plants and water treatment facilities. The Empire had told its people that humans were monsters who would destroy Velcrim civilization. The reality was very different. Dr. So-Hyun Kwon worked as humanity's chief negotiator, traveling to neutral worlds to meet with representatives from other galactic species. She was not military, but a former diplomat who specialized in international law. We propose a comprehensive reform of galactic military law, So-Hyun presented to a gathering of 50 species. Based on Earth's experience with the Geneva Conventions and other laws of war, the alien delegates listened as she outlined the proposals. Civilian populations must be protected. Prisoners must be treated humanely. Cultural sites and medical facilities were off limits. Chemical and biological weapons were banned. Proportionality must be maintained in military responses. These rules seemed to favor the weak. A delegate from a militaristic species objected. These rules favor civilization, So-Hyun replied. War without rules is not war. It is barbarism. And barbarism eventually consumes those who practice it. Look at the Velcrim Empire. They violated every principle of civilized warfare, and now their own people turn against them. The delegates could not argue with results. They had watched the Velcrim collapse not because humanity was stronger, but because humanity fought with discipline and purpose, while the Velcrim fought with only brute force. Captain Jae-won Im commanded the battleship Times Mercy Asterisk, a hospital ship equipped with weapons only for self-defense. His mission was to provide medical care to anyone who needed it, regardless of which side they fought on. Captain, we have a distress signal, his communications officer reported. Velcrim medical transport under attack by pirates. Pirates? Jae-won stood quickly. What faction? Unknown. They appear to be taking advantage of the war's chaos to raid vulnerable ships. Jae-won did not hesitate. Battle stations. Protect that transport. The Times Mercy Times was not built for combat, but it mounted enough weapons to drive off the pirates. When the Velcrim transport was safe, Jae-won opened a channel. This is Captain Jae-won Im of the human vessel Times Mercy Asterisk. You are under our protection. Do you require medical assistance? There was a long pause. Then a Velcrim voice responded, confused. You are our enemy. Why do you help us? Because you are wounded and in need, Jae-won said simply. War has rules. One of those rules is that medical personnel are protected, regardless of which side they serve. The Velcrim medical ship limped to a human-occupied station for repairs. The doctors and nurses aboard told everyone about the human ship that saved them. The story spread, adding to the growing narrative that humans fought honorably. Back on Earth, Admiral Taejin Choi prepared for what he hoped would be the final phase of the war. Intelligence reported that Commander Thelkos, the officer who ordered the New Busan massacre, was hiding on a fortress world deep in Velcrim territory. I want him alive, Taejin ordered Captain Do-hyun Park. He stands trial for his crimes. That is not negotiable. Kreen. Taejin. Klusing. Do-hyun understood. Justice, not revenge. That was the human way. They would not sink to the level of their enemies. The operation to capture Thelkos involved 50 ships and 2,000 Special Forces soldiers. Colonel Minho Kang led the ground assault, his Ghost Corps infiltrating the fortress while fleet combat created a distraction. The fortress was heavily defended. Thelkos had surrounded himself with loyal soldiers who would fight to the death. But Minho had learned something about Velkrim psychology. They valued strength and respected superior force. "This is Colonel Minho Kang of Earth Forces," he broadcast on all frequencies. "We have surrounded this fortress. You cannot win, but you can live. Surrender Commander Thelkos for trial, and the rest of you will be treated as prisoners of war under galactic law. You will receive food, medical care, and humane treatment. You have my word." "The word of a human means nothing," Thelkos responded. "You are soft. You are weak. We destroyed your empire in 6 months," Minho interrupted coldly. "Are the weak capable of that? Your emperor sent you to war without cause. He ordered you to massacre civilians. He broke every law of civilized warfare. And now you pay the price for his arrogance." Inside the fortress, Velkrim soldiers looked at each other. They had seen the broadcasts of human forces treating prisoners well. They had heard stories of humans protecting enemy civilians. They were tired, hungry, and far from home. What were they dying for? One of Thelkos's own officers drew a weapon and pointed it at his commander. "I did not join the military to murder children," the officer said. "I will not die defending someone who violated every oath we took." Within an hour, Thelkos was in human custody. The fortress surrendered without further fighting, and across Velkrim space, similar scenes played out as military units decided they would rather surrender to honorable enemies than die for a dishonorable cause. Ambassador Nari Kim stood before the Galactic Council once again. This time, the chamber was silent as she spoke. "Commander Thelkos will stand trial in a neutral court with judges from multiple species," she announced. "The charges are crimes against sapient life, violation of laws of war, and murder of civilians. If convicted, he will serve his sentence in a human facility, where he will be treated according to the same standards we apply to all prisoners." She paused, looking at each delegate. "But this is about more than one officer's crimes. This is about ensuring such crimes never happen again. Earth proposes the formation of a new Galactic Laws of War Commission. We will establish clear rules. We will create enforcement mechanisms. We will ensure that no species can massacre civilians without consequences." "And if we refuse?" a delegate asked nervously. "Then we will enforce these laws ourselves," Nari said simply. "We did not seek this war. We did not want this responsibility. But we will not allow another New Busan. Not anywhere. Not ever. We will not farm. We will not farm. Not ever." The vote was not even close. 43 species voted yes. Only 2 voted no. The rest abstained. The commission would be formed. As the council session ended, Emperor Kelvar received a final message from Admiral Taejin Choi. It was not a demand for unconditional surrender. It was an offer. "End this war," Taejin said. "Accept the new laws of war. Submit to trial those who committed atrocities. In return, we will help rebuild your economy. We will withdraw our forces. We will return your territory. We do not seek your destruction. We seek only justice and lasting peace." Kelvar looked at the message for a long time. He could refuse. He could fight to the bitter end. But what would that accomplish? His empire was already lost. His people were suffering. His legacy would be as the emperor who led the Velkrim to ruin. Or he could accept. He could end the suffering. He could give his people a chance to rebuild. It was not a choice at all, really. The war ended not with explosions, but with signatures on documents. Emperor Kelvar signed the armistice in a ceremony broadcast across the galaxy. His hands shook as he marked the treaty. And his eyes were empty. He had ruled an empire. Now, He ruled a diminished collection of worlds, learning to survive without conquest. Admiral Taejin Choi signed for humanity. He looked older than his years, worn down by months of warfare. But his hand was steady, and his voice was clear when he spoke. "This war should never have happened," Taejin said. 30,000 innocent people died because one empire thought might made right. Today, we establish a new principle. Military strength must be tempered by moral responsibility. Victory means nothing if it is achieved through atrocity. On Earth, crowds gathered in cities to watch the signing. But there were no wild celebrations. Too many families were grieving. Too many soldiers would not come home. Victory had a cost. And humans remembered that cost even in their moment of triumph. Captain Do-hyun Park stood on the bridge of the Times Defiance *, watching the ceremonies from space. His crew was quiet. They had survived, but so many others had not. He thought of the people who died at New Busan, the incident that started everything. "Captain," his communications officer said softly, "we're receiving messages from Velkrim civilians. They're thanking us for ending the war." Do-hyun nodded slowly. That was strange, to be thanked by the enemy. But maybe they were not enemies anymore. Maybe they were just people who had been caught in a war they did not choose. The trial of Commander Thelkos took place on a neutral world, overseen by judges from 7 different species. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy. A lesson in justice for civilizations that had forgotten what the word meant. Thelkos stood in the dock, unrepentant. "I followed my emperor's orders," he said. "I served my empire loyally." "You massacred 30,000 civilians," the lead judge responded. "You targeted schools, hospitals, and residential areas. You violated every law of war. Laws made by the weak to protect themselves from the strong." Dr. Ji-won Lee testified at the trial. Her voice steady despite her anger. She had been on New Busan. She had treated the survivors. She had seen the burned bodies of children. "I am a scientist," Ji-won said. "I study life in all its forms." Commander Thelkos ended 30,000 lives in seconds because he wanted to send a message. He turned living, thinking beings into a political statement. That is not strength. That is cowardice. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all charges. Thelkos was sentenced to life imprisonment in a human facility, where he would live out his days in a clean cell with adequate food and medical care. It was far better than he deserved. But humans did not believe in cruel punishment. Even for monsters. Across former Velkrim territory, human forces began withdrawing. General Young-soo Han oversaw the transition, ensuring local governments were stable before leaving. "General," a Velkrim official approached him on the last day of occupation. "May I ask a question?" "Of course. Why did you treat us so well?" "We were your enemies. Your own people died fighting us." Young-soo considered his answer carefully. "Because we fight wars to end them, not to perpetuate them. If we had been cruel conquerors, you would have resented us. You would have rebelled. The cycle of violence would continue. But if we showed you respect and dignity, maybe you would remember that when facing your own conflicts in the future." The official looked thoughtful. "You think very far ahead. We have to," Young-soo replied. "Our history taught us that vengeance feels good in the moment, but it plants the seeds of future wars. We learned that lesson through much pain. We hope you will learn it more easily." The Galactic Laws of War Commission began its work, with Dr. So-hyun Kwon as its first director. Representatives from 100 species gathered to draft comprehensive regulations governing military conflict. The discussions were difficult. Species who had waged war for thousands of years resisted change. But humanity had demonstrated something undeniable. Their way worked. Their laws prevented atrocities without preventing self-defense. Their discipline made them more effective, not less. "I propose we begin with the principle of proportionality," So-hyun explained to the assembly. "Military force must be proportional to the threat faced. You do not bomb cities to stop a raid. You do not massacre civilians to punish soldiers. But what if the enemy does not follow these rules? A delegate asked. Then you still follow them, Seo-hyun said firmly. Because the moment you abandon your principles, you become no better than your enemy. The moral high ground is a real strategic advantage. We proved that in this war. The Commission worked for a year to create a comprehensive legal framework. Every species that wanted to maintain their military had to agree to follow the new laws, and humanity made it clear. They would enforce these laws if necessary. Captain Jae-won-im and his hospital ship Times, Mercy Times, became a symbol of the new order. He traveled to war-torn regions, providing medical care to any species that needed it. His ship's motto was simple: we heal. Young people from dozens of species applied to serve on the Times, Mercy *. They wanted to be part of something noble, something that transcended traditional military service. Jae-won trained them carefully, teaching them that compassion was not weakness, and that protecting life was as important as defending territory. On Earth, children learned about the war in their schools. But they did not learn to glorify it. They learned about the cost, the sacrifice, and the importance of peace. They learned that humans had fought because they had no choice, not because they wanted to. Private Minji, Oh, who had become famous for her bravery in battle, left the military after her term of service ended. She became a teacher, working with children on colony worlds. Someone asked her why she did not continue her military career. I saw enough war, Minji said simply. Now I want to help build a generation that might not have to fight. But some soldiers continued serving because the galaxy still needed protectors. Colonel Minho Kang's Ghost Corps transitioned from combat operations to peacekeeping. They responded to piracy, rescued hostages, and provided security in unstable regions. The skills that made them deadly in war made them effective in peace. Sergeant Unji Bae stayed with the Military Medical Corps, training new medics. She taught them not just how to treat wounds, but how to care for the psychological trauma that combat created. She knew from experience that invisible wounds could be as devastating as physical ones. Ambassador Nari Kim achieved her original goal. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Council, but it came with something she had not expected. Earth was given a permanent seat with veto power, recognizing their role in reforming galactic civilization. We did not seek this position, Nari told the Council. We wanted only to be equals among the stars. But if you trust us with this responsibility, we will carry it with honor. We will work to ensure that military might serves justice, not ambition. The Council chamber, which had once laughed at human pretensions, now listened respectfully. They had learned that humans were not to be underestimated. Commander Seonghwa Ryu transitioned from military cyber warfare to civilian applications, helping establish secure communication networks across multiple species. The skills he used to disrupt enemy logistics now helped build trade and cultural exchange. Captain Heejin Song and the other stealth ship commanders revealed their vessels to the galaxy, but only after the war ended. The technology was shared with the Galactic Council, with one condition. It could only be used for defense and peacekeeping, never for aggression. The treaty included provisions for enforcement, backed by Earth's willingness to intervene against violators. 20 years after the war, Admiral Taejin Choi attended a graduation ceremony at the newly established Galactic Military Academy. The academy taught officers from dozens of species, combining the best military traditions from across the galaxy with humanity's laws of war. The keynote speaker was Captain Do-hyun Park, now a senior admiral himself. He looked at the young faces in the audience, humans and aliens sitting together, learning together. You represent hope, Do-hyun told them. 20 years ago, the galaxy was a dangerous place, where the strong preyed on the weak. Today, we have laws. We have accountability. We have a shared commitment to civilized warfare. But this did not happen by chance. It happened because people fought for it, and some died for it. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. Remember them. Remember why they fought, and dedicate yourselves to making their sacrifice matter. Be warriors when you must, but be peacekeepers when you can. Be strong enough to fight, but wise enough to avoid fighting when possible. That is the true lesson humanity taught the galaxy. In the audience, a young woman sat with perfect attention. She was Do-hyun's daughter, following in her father's path. Next to her sat a young Velcrim officer, descendant of the empire that had once been humanity's enemy. They studied together, trained together, and would serve together. After the ceremony, they walked through the academy gardens, discussing their upcoming assignments. "My grandfather fought against yours," the Velcrim officer said quietly. "I know," Do-hyun's daughter replied. "My father speaks of the war sometimes. He does not hate your people. He never did. But we killed so many humans. And you paid the price. But more importantly, you learned. Your species reformed. You follow the laws of war now. You protect civilians. That is what matters." The Velcrim officer nodded. "We have a saying now. Before you start a war, ask yourself, are you ready for humans to finish it?" "That is not the saying I would want remembered," she said. "Then what?" She thought for a moment. "Before you start a war, ask yourself, is there another way? And if the answer is yes, take that way instead." They continued walking as the sun set over the academy. Two young officers from former enemy species, preparing to serve a galaxy that had learned, slowly and painfully, to choose law over might, justice over conquest, and peace over endless cycles of revenge. The humans had taught the galaxy well. But perhaps their greatest lesson was this: the strongest warrior is the one who knows when not to fight, and the truest victory is the one that turns enemies into allies. Above them, in the darkening sky, ships from 100 worlds patrolled together, defending not territory or empire, but the principles that made civilization possible. They flew in formations taught at human academies, following laws written by human lawyers, upholding standards demonstrated by human soldiers who had fought not for glory, but for something more important. They fought so that others would not have to. And that, in the end, was the real victory.